So we already discussed the variational principles and its equivalence with respect to with the Galerkin formulation of a weak form of method of weighted residual. And wherever variational principles exist, they can be related to this Galerkin approach of weak form of weighted residual, and the two are equivalent. And therefore, we will follow the method of weighted residual formulation because it is more general and it is also applicable. It can be used even when suitable variational principles are not available or unknown or they just don't exist. So the basic idea of the approximation seems pretty straightforward. I mean, you have a governing differential equation with associated boundary conditions. Uh, you just choose a set of trial functions, choose an approximation in the series form, much like your Fourier series or any other series approximation, and with the proviso that the trial functions that we choose, they agree with the homogeneous form of essential boundary conditions of the problem. Those are specified. So if uh, there are boundary conditions which are specified, essential boundary conditions or Dirichlet boundary conditions are specified at some part of the domain, some part of the boundary, then the trial functions should be such that they vanish at that part of the boundary where essential boundary conditions are specified. And the requirement, why this is so is revealed, or the reason for this is revealed in this variational principle formulation, wherein you see this term and you relate that this is what the weighting function looks like in the weighted residual statement, weighted residual method. And this is the variation on the unknown function, right? So if this function is specified at a boundary condition, at that boundary, then its variation should vanish. And that is why the trial functions which are used as the weighting function in Galerkin approach, they should vanish at those points or that part of the boundary where essential boundary conditions are specified. So it is essentially coming from the uh, requirement that the virtual displacement at the boundary where the displacements are prescribed should be zero, or there should not be any variation. The displacement, there is no scope of variation of the displacements or variation of the primary variable at those points where the primary variable is prescribed. Right? So that is why the weighting function or the trial functions have to satisfy the homogeneous form of essential boundary condition at those points. Natural boundary condition, they will be taken care of approximately during the process of solution, and we just have to include relevant terms in the boundary residual corresponding to natural boundary condition. So that seems fairly straightforward, but the appearances can be deceptive, and this seemingly very simple form becomes very unwieldy or very difficult to implement if the problem domain becomes complex. It is fine if it is one dimensional, means just one variable and in a straight line, this looks fine. But if it is a curved boundary, so even if it is a one dimensional only single variable defining, but the variation is along a curvature or the curved length, then it becomes a difficult proposition. It is not possible to come up with a single variation which will describe the entire range. And similarly, what if the material properties are not uniform all over the domain? There are different parts of the domain where the properties change. So obviously the same approximation may not hold, or it may become very difficult to maintain the construct the approximation valid over the entire domain. So it makes sense to explore the possibility. And also another problem is these coefficients that we have, Cj, they are, as of now, they don't mean anything. They are just the weighting coefficient, and if you go by the vector space or function space rule, then these are just the generalized coordinates with respect to these bases. Right? So on their own, without this basis, on their own they do not mean anything. So wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't you find it interesting or useful if immediately after the process of solution you somehow had an idea of what is the primary variable all over? Or in other words, what I am saying is, can I somehow make these coefficients same as value of the primary variable at discrete points? That will be evaluated during the solution, after the process of solution. But, and this approximation is anyway arbitrary, I can choose any approximation as long as the terms are linearly independent. That should be fine. So the question that I am posing is, wouldn't it be interesting if I can come up with an approximation which after the process of solution gives me the value of primary variable at a few discrete points in the domain right away. So immediately I know the trend available, what is how the primary variable is varying all over the domain. I don't really need to go back to approximation and see and plot the result to see how the primary variable looks like, or how the variation of primary variable is defined within the domain, right? So does that sound familiar? This brings us to the problem of finite element concept. So the coefficients, unknown coefficients C of the approximation, they are generalized coordinates in the function space spanned by linearly independent basis functions. So they are always coupled. So Cj do not have any value on their own right. They are always coupled with these basis functions. But we can always restructure these approximations such that instead of these generalized coordinates, we can substitute them, we can have the values of the unknown function u at different points in space, different points in the domain. So essentially what we are looking at is an interpolation problem. We construct the approximation as an interpolation model of the value of the primary variable at different points in the domain. Right? So essentially we are looking at interpolation model. So approximate solution is constructed as interpolation between the nodal values of primary variables of the problem. So in order to construct the approximation u hat, we just consider summation of uj nj. Nj is the interpolation function associated with node j, and uj is the value of primary variable u at node j. And this nj, they are the interpolation function which satisfy the interpolation condition, that is nj should evaluate to unity when it is evaluated at node j, but it should vanish when it is evaluated at all other nodes of the approximation. So nj at xk should be equal to delta jk, where delta jk is the Kronecker delta. It is equal to 1 when j is equal to k and 0 otherwise. right? So does this expression appear familiar? I hope you can recall the discussion we had regarding the interpolation uh, methods.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so these they look like the interpolation function, the function nj(x).
Right, right. These are interpolation functions by definition. Now the problem, I mean, this is a very laudable goal, and obviously nobody should have any problems with this objective. If I wish to know the value of the primary variable at different points in the domain immediately after the solution. So that's obviously a very interesting kind of arrangement which is going to be very useful. But the problem is how do we construct these interpolation functions? And if the number of points, such points, are distributed through the domain, then it becomes very difficult to construct interpolation. And as we have seen, higher degree interpolation can always have uh, unpleasant surprises. The function value might agree, approximation might agree at the nodes, but in between nodes there can be very wild fluctuation or wild oscillations if we try to fit in a very high degree of polynomial interpolation. Right? So there is a problem with at the other end of the spectrum. If we have too many number of nodes, then there is going to be a problem of fluctuation, high degree polynomial, and meeting the requirements. But we'll come to that later. So the solution is, instead of approximating over the whole domain, for example, this is an arbitrary shaped domain, and this is complete, as you can say, very complex domain. I mean, you cannot think of a simple approximation which can be constructed over the entire domain and which will cover all the nodes of the domain. But the problem obviously becomes very simple if we conceive of this entire domain as being a patchwork of smaller subdomains. So this domain omega, I consider that this domain omega can be divided into smaller subdomains. For example, these are done as squares, and this part I can model it as a triangle with reasonable accuracy. This trapezoid I can model it as a rectangle and a triangle, and so on. So using an assembly of rectangles and triangles, any complex domain can be divided into sub-elements. And you should recall our discussion that any complex curve, I mean, no matter whatever this curvature is or whatever this shape of the curve is, it can be represented to reasonable degree of accuracy by a straight line if I consider a small enough portion. So a triangle or a rectangle of a reasonable size can be used for modeling of this any arbitrary domain, and this is the basis of what we call as the finite element. So divide the domain into non-overlapping regular subdomains, and that regular word is key here. Why do I want regular? Because it is easier for me to construct interpolation over a regular geometry. Just imagine how easy it is to construct an interpolation model over a such a nice square region, and compare the difficulties that we will have if we were to model the interpolation for entire domain omega at one go. So over individual subdomain, this square defined by these four lines, I can very easily construct the interpolation model here. I mean, it's just two-dimensional interpolation, one interpolation in X and interpolation in Y, and the product will give us the desired interpolation model. Right, so that's very straightforward process. Uh, but the total domain as a whole, it is a very challenging problem. So what we do here is we divide entire domain as a union or union of subdomains, right? So non-overlapping subdomains. So it is omega is approximated by a union of all such smaller subdomains, regular geometry, such that there is no intersection. So there is no overlap between these subdomains. So while the union of omega e is an approximation for omega, total domain of the problem, at the same time there should not be any intersection between the subdomains. So the intersection of any two subdomains is a null set. So that is the basis of finite elements that we cover. And the rules of partition of domain. So this is the overlap that I was referring to. Omega e is this is straight edge and this is parabolic. This one edge is parabolic, and omega e plus 1. So that is the hidden line there. So that is beneath this omega e. So this is an overlap between the two elements, right? And this is not allowed. So there cannot. Why it is not allowed? Because the same part of the domain is being represented twice. So union of these elements cannot be a good approximation for the omega total domain, because some part of the domain is being over represented. So that is not allowed. Overlap is not allowed, and similarly this gap between the two elements is also not allowed, because that will also lead to a modeling error by leaving out this portion of the domain. So total omega is this uh, rhombus region, and if there is no gap as such in the original domain, then there is no reason why uh, the assembly of finite elements should leave this gap. So this is also not allowed. So such overlap and such gaps between the element assemblies, they are not allowed. What is possible here is what I was referring to, that these straight edge, regular geometries with straight sides, they will of course have some error in modeling curved boundaries. So this part of this is what we call as discretization error, and this part of the domain is always lost. There is no way to recover this. So that is why in our previous slide I was referring to this as approximation. So union of elements, subdomains, is approximately equal to omega, because while modeling these curved boundaries, some part of the domain might be left out, and that is a discretization error. Of course, this discretization error can be made smaller if I reduce the element size. If I choose to divide this, develop one element further here, then this portion will be covered by one element, one triangular element here, and the discretization error would be reduced. So the discretization error can be reduced at the cost of adding more elements, and uh, that is called mesh refinement. So using finite element mesh of smaller sizes, so the curved domains, curved boundaries can be represented to a better accuracy, and that way we can develop better approximation of the whole domain. So now we come to the next question. So once we construct this approximation, we developed the approximation weighted residual statement we actually impose over the entire domain. Now we are talking of the entire domain being represented as assembly of these subdomains, and these subdomains are regular figures with regular geometry, so that the approximation can be developed over these regular geometries. So now the next logical step would be the domain residual that we have, or the weighted residual statement which deals with domain integral and boundary integral. So we divide that weighted residual statement as sum of weighted residual statements over individual subdomains. Because none of these subdomains are overlapping, so the weighted residual statement over the entire domain omega and boundary gamma can be represented as sum of the weighted residual statement over omega e plus weighted residual statement over omega e plus 1 plus weighted residual statement over omega e plus 2 and so on. So gradually, as I assemble the weighted residual statements from all the elements, I approximate the weighted residual statement for the entire domain. And that is what we are referring to in this slide. So this is the weighted residual statement that we started with, defined over the entire domain omega, and associated boundary term, boundary residual at boundary gamma. And these were in the weak form. While we developed the weak form, this differential operator A and M, they were converted into another set of differential operator A and B and C and D, which operated on the weighting function and the primary variable, and again integrated over the whole domain and the associated boundary. Now this whole domain, integral over the entire domain, is replaced by, or is approximated by, union of these integrals evaluated over smaller subdomains, individual subdomains. So omega e. So I start, let's say I divide omega into n number of subdomains omega e, ranging from 1 to n. So I contribute this, I evaluate these domains over individual subdomain, that is omega e. And similarly, this boundary is evaluated over individual element boundaries, and then the contributions are added together. So unions, just as omega is given as the union of omega e, so weighted residual statement over domain omega is given as union of weighted residual statement over the union of individual subdomains. Weighted residual statement over individual subdomains, and the boundary residual corresponding to individual elements. And that is the essence of finite element. This equation that we develop by virtue of this substitution, that will lead to what we call as the finite element equations. And all this essentially involves the entire process. So phi hat is the approximation that we develop over individual element. Wj, they are the trial functions, and phi hat is approximated as an interpolation model. So Wj would be, again using Galerkin formulation, we would be using the same interpolation functions that we use in the approximation of phi hat. So these are readily evaluated, because interpolation functions are functions of x, y and z spatial coordinates, and these are the spatial derivatives. A and B, they are differential operators with respect to spatial derivatives, and these derivatives can be evaluated, and the integral can then be evaluated with respect to space coordinates, and similarly for these boundary term. And eventually we will end up with simplified equation where the spatial derivatives have been taken care of, and we end up with either ordinary differential equation in time, depending on whether we are including time dependent effects, or if we are ignoring time dependent effects, or if the problem is such that time variations are not significant, then we end up with a set of algebraic, linear algebraic simultaneous equations, which can be solved by using any of these linear algebra solvers, Gaussian elimination, NUE decomposition, or Cholesky decomposition, whatever, or even iterative schemes. And there you go, you have the solution of the problem. That's all. So this equation that we have here, coming from this weighted residual statement over the defined over the entire domain and associated boundary term, translating that into summation of domain integrals and boundary integrals over each element is the essence of finite element method. Now, as you can probably guess, success of this is entirely defined by how well can you construct an interpolation model for the primary variable. If you can construct a good interpolation model, or how whatever is the basic interpolation model which works for the problem, if you can derive that interpolation model, then the problem is solved. All that you need to do is evaluate these derivatives with respect to those interpolation functions, and evaluate this definite integral. That's the end of it. After we evaluate the definite integral, again, when we say evaluate the definite integral, this is going to be done by using numerical quadrature that we discussed, Gauss quadrature, or rectangle rule, trapezoid rule, or even Simpson rule, Newton Cotes formula, whatever. Right? So those tools are also available to you, and the entire process becomes so automatic. The user intervention is only limited to identification of what is the primary variable and what is the type of interpolation that is required. You define the interpolation, rest of the things are automatically done in a computer program. So this entire process can be devoted to, left entirely to the computer, and the process is very, very automatic, very well suited for automatic computation. And that is the reason finite element has had such a massive success, along with the growth in computer technology. It is not that we did not know about finite element method, or people did not know about finite element method or something similar. The concept is known to exist since the times of Gauss, 200 years back. Right? But it did not succeed because the tools were not available. The automatic computers were not available at that time. For manual calculation, this is obviously a very tedious process and error prone at that. But leave it to a computer, and this is a very systematic, very logical set of instructions that can represent the entire process, and the computer code can take care of that very easily. All that you need to do, all the user needs to do is provide the basic input data for the solution of the problem, and rest of the things are taken care of by the computer. So as easy as it goes. So any questions? We will start our discussion of finite element method in one dimension in our next lecture. So today I am not going to start the finite element. I would like to go by what we call as what I call it as learn by example. So we will take up a problem again. the truss problem or bar problem, that's a very convenient vehicle to drive us through this process of finite element solution. It is simple enough and it is general enough to explain all the details, all the mechanisms of finite element process. So, any question with respect to whatever we have discussed so far? Are you able to understand this last slide? This slide is the essence of all that we will be discussing in the rest of the semester. No questions?
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, what are these A and B differential operators and how do we
Oh,
find them?
see, in weighted residual statement, when you develop the weak form, the original operator derivative shifts to the weighting function term, isn't it?
Yes,
So
sir.
the original differential equation had this differential operator L, but when you develop the weak form, some of the derivatives would be transferred to weighting function W. So A and B are differential operators of order lower than L in the original